Hey, what's going on? Once again, I am Brian. This is the Live Life Now podcast. And this episode is about my time volunteering. I volunteered in other countries, specifically in Colombia and Ecuador. I've also done a little bit of volunteering in the United States and given to charities around the world, but mainly in the United States. And this is how these opportunities ended up changing me for the better and teaching me a lot about myself and others, and just kind of going into some of my backstory about all of that. So I've done a couple different things over the years in regards to volunteering. The ones that come to mind, number one, I was a volunteer English teacher in Colombia. I taught English in Bogota, Colombia, mainly from about the years 2016 until 2019. I also sometimes did, virtual videos and maybe like guest spots. But basically, when I went on my world travels, which I traveled for 2.5 years, and then I would have other random trips to Colombia, I ended up going to the schools. I would play music for the kids. I would answer questions about my travels, what it was like being from the United States, and a whole bunch of other things too. So there was a lot I learned. I was in classes with students, like preschool, small as 3 years old. The oldest kids were usually around the age of 17 at oldest, 16 to 17. I also interacted with a lot of teachers, administration, and everybody else along the way. So my experiences happened because my ex was her family is it was a private school, so it was two private schools, and they are part of the ownership group and the management group of these schools. So it gave me opportunities to come in as an outsider, somebody that didn't have proper teaching experience, and come in as they basically just to say hi to the kids and stuff, and just have them practice their English more than anything. It went very well. I ended up being asked to keep coming back. I realized that while I was there, sometimes it would get a little boring. Sometimes not all the kids knew English all that well. And sometimes I was being asked to speak for upwards of an hour, multiple times a day. So it became almost like almost like a full-time job at that moment. And I realized they had a music department in the school, and I asked them if I could borrow a guitar. They gave me an acoustic guitar, and then I was able to play songs for the kids, which definitely boosted the interaction, definitely got them way more interested in what I was talking about and what I was doing, and got them really excited and just happy to, have me be there. I mean, also, it was nice because I was basically interrupting their normal class. They didn't have to do their normal work. That was certainly another reason to pay attention to me and give me some feedback. So that was really nice. I ended up making friends with some of the teachers there. And as time went on, I became more of a regular fixture at the school. Once again, it was on and off. It wasn't all the time. It was when I was in Colombia and when I, was specifically in Bogota. There was a second school that also the family was in charge of. So I sometimes went there. But the main school I was at was in an area of town near the airport, and that was the school I hung out with, the large majority of the time, by far, 90 something percent of the time, I would say. So what did I do? How did this occur? I was in the middle of my world travels. I wasn't, like in a normal job. When I was in Colombia, when my ex was visiting her family, we stayed at their house. We kind of took a little bit of a break from the traveling during those Colombia stops. And it gave me opportunities, where I didn't really have much going on. I was so used to moving like nonstop and making plans and being ready for the next day. And this kind of gave stretches where there wasn't really a detailed plan for the next day. So because of that, I would go to the schools, and I usually could walk there. Also, my daughters, they ended up going to the school for a little bit because they were in Colombia. They were young. They didn't have their normal school set up just yet as they were underage. So they were able to go there, practice their Spanish, interact with their kids, and have some social time as well. So I went there kind of like a bit of a supervisor for them, but quickly I got wrapped up into going to different classes. Once word was that I was there and that the kids were excited about me, other English teachers asked me to go to their classes, and it kind of just went from there. At first, it just kind of started out like a Q&A. I would get a lot of the same type of questions from the students. What was my favorite country? What nowadays it would seem totally normal in the fact that I'm on YouTube doing this, but at the time it was kind of a shock in like 2016 to hear, who's your favorite YouTuber? At that moment, I had no idea what a YouTuber barely was. Like I had an idea, obviously, I wasn't completely blind to it, but I was like, what? People do this as a living for a living? Oh, okay, interesting. And you can have a favorite one. It didn't seem like the typical question to ask, but for the younger generation, it was. And I would go out of my way to, talk with the kids, ask them questions, basic stuff. A lot of them were not very good with their English. So it would be like, how are you? Oh, good. You? Yeah, great. Basics. What's your favorite color? Whatever. Just an opportunity for them to feel more comfortable practicing English with a native speaker, which was a big thing, because a lot of the teachers in Colombia, while a lot of them could speak English and some of them were pretty good at it, they all still spoke it with an accent, obviously totally normal, totally fine, but hearing me versus their teacher was a dramatic difference. And also when they teach English in most schools, they're teaching the British style English. So when I come in as a United States citizen, it's definitely a bit of a shock and a different style of English. Also, the kids, they didn't necessarily know who I was. And once I started telling them my stories and things, I was a bit like a minor celebrity around there. So it was kind of nice. Kids would be super happy to see me. Once I started playing music, especially, it was like amazing. Some of them want my autographs, whatever. But it was really nice. It made me feel really special. And hopefully I made them feel really special too. I also kind of realized I was like an ambassador of the United States. A lot of them, especially the younger kids, had probably never met people from the United States. They had heard stories and, they had a general idea of what people from the United States would be like. And it wasn't always positive, depending on their situation, their social situation, maybe their political views, whatever the case may be. So I was able to give, my perspective of these things. And I tried to be very kind and overly extroverted towards everybody to give like a positive feedback of what somebody from the United States could be like. So that was a big part of it. During these on and off trips to Colombia, one of the times I was there for about 6 months. And during that 6-month stretch, which was by far the longest stretch I stayed there, there was an English teacher who had, and that was part of a motorcycle accident. And they were down an English teacher. They asked me, since I was there all the time anyway, to become an actual full-time teacher. When that occurred, it was a different story, because now I was not just the fun-loving volunteer guy that would just show up and tell stories and sing songs, or maybe interact with them depending on the day. Now I was more like an actual teacher. I was told, don't worry so much about grades, but mark down their grades. I had a teacher's. Actually, they didn't even give me a book. I just wrote down stuff, and I was like, well, what am I going to teach them? Just make something up. And I was like, oh my goodness. So at first it was scary, because I'm like, well, what am I going to talk about that's not about myself? Because it's easy to talk about myself and my stories, but to have like a real lesson where I'm teaching them grammar, or I'm teaching them vocabulary, or I'm trying to make things fun for students who didn't want to be there, didn't necessarily want to take an English class. And now they're sitting in school, they're bored, they want to talk with their friends. Some of them were fairly rebellious. how could I make this exciting for them? And the classes they had me teach were not the little kids, which would have been a challenge because those little kids would sometimes get up and run around and it'd be wild. But it was more of the high school age kids and not the oldest kids who were usually more well behaved, but kind of like the early high school kids. And some of those ones could be pretty troublesome. And so eventually they kind of gave me a general idea of what I should be teaching them. They gave me a book. I had never, formally taught English. So even I was learning a few things about English, little rules and things that I had just taken for granted. And when you speak the language, you don't know why this is the way it is. You just speak it. That's the way you do it, So when you're actually like learning the rules behind why you speak the way you speak in English, that definitely was a learning experience for me too. And I had done a quick stop in South Florida to take care of some stuff and then come back, and I brought a bunch of candy and stuff from the United States. And it was, the kids were excited about that. So if they did well, since I would give them candy or stuff, but mainly the candy was for the teachers. A lot of them had never had a lot of what I considered the more superior candy, that they couldn't as easily find in Colombia. Not that they couldn't find it, but usually it was imported and way more expensive. So I was bringing all types of stuff over that a lot of people had never even tried. That was kind of cool. It made me more friends for sure. And then I started hanging out after school with some of the teachers and had like a bond, we would hang out. And at first people were kind of paranoid of me because I was the brother-in-law of the principal of the school, or at least the head administrator of the school. So they didn't know if they could be like normal around me or if they had to keep their guard up. Once it was learned, like, he's not here to, he's not judging you. He's not watching over you. He's just hanging out. People got much more cool with me, and I got to be part of a lot of the activities. I got to go on some of the field trip type of things. I got to be part of their teachers' days. You name it. It was really awesome. But when I was a full-time teacher, that was less awesome because instead of just coming and going as I pleased, now I was there all day. I had lesson plans. I still tried to make it interesting in my own way. For example, I did a lesson where basically the idea was that there's 4 people and you all live in a house. And I gave each person a scenario. One person might have been like a doctor. Another was unemployed. Another was whatever. Basically, they all had their characters. And I would say, okay, this person makes a lot of the money. So they have they're reliable on their paying the rent. This person recently lost their job and they're looking, but they don't have something, but they've agreed to do more of the chores. This person is reliable, but they don't make a lot of money, and it's kind of like week to week with them, or whatever. So I'd give everybody a scenario, and I would make them explain in English how they were going to make it work, and then I would throw curveballs in there. Oh, this person had a car accident. They have to get their car fixed. Now they don't have the money for the rent. And I would just come up with the scenarios like that and make them explain in English, like as a group, how would they figure it all out? Like, what were the solutions? So it was kind of like a game that I would make. And I did numerous versions of these games. That was just one that comes to mind. But I was trying to teach them life lessons like that in a way to like make them think more of like how adults have to figure things out and work together to come up with solutions. Okay, this person's car broke down. He doesn't have the money, but maybe he doesn't have to get his car repaired right away. This person can give him a ride to work, and then how he can pay the rent that month, or whatever they wanted to come up with, as long as they could explain it in English. Anyways, that was what I did a lot of. A lot of things that were not from the lesson plan, and just tried to be more interactive, connector on a deeper level versus just quizzes and things all the time. Ultimately, though, some of the classes were really bad, and the administrators came to me and they said, hey, if these people give you a hard time, let us know. We'll come in there and like put them in their place. Because a lot of people would challenge me, that they did at first. It was they were respectful. They didn't know me. But as I was there every day, they wanted to see what they could get away with. And while I could be strict, I was not their normal proper teacher. I was like a substitute teacher, and I didn't know how far I was allowed to go on certain things, and I didn't want to be too wild or strict on some of these kids because that really I didn't feel was my place to do so. Yeah, I was their teacher, and I sure did. I make sure they did their work, and were they penalized if they didn't or if they didn't participate? Yes, of course. I tried to lay the law down and make sure that they, were respectful. But it got to the point where a lot of the kids were not respectful, or at least in every class, it felt like there was at least one or two. Let's say that. I have overstated it. A lot of the kids were respectful. It felt like a lot of kids weren't because I would have those handful of kids every day. And, those two or three made me feel like it was more like 8 or 10. But it really, if I think about it properly, it was more like 2 or 3 kids that were always tough. Sometimes it was few as 1 or 2 per class. But when it's almost every class, and this is every day, and they're always just trying to get away with stuff, I quickly, after about a month, I was like, you know what? I'm supposed to just be here on vacation and volunteering. I didn't sign up for this. This isn't like a real job. They hadn't even agreed to pay me or anything. I was like, I don't really want to do this anymore. I'll come in and help. I'll come in and do private lessons maybe, but I don't want to run full classes of kids. So that was kind of the end of my like full-time English teaching. Ultimately, they gave me a little bit of money as a thank you, which was very nice. I didn't expect it, nor did they have to. So I did that in Colombia. I also contributed to a reforestation project in Tena, Ecuador, in the Amazon rainforest. And basically what was going on is we were on somebody's like property, basically, like kind of like the equivalent of a farm, but without animals. And it was kind of like a yoga retreat / like spiritual retreat. And you would eat on the ground with your other volunteers, and there was people from all over the world, and they, it was definitely like a meditation type of situation. In a lot of cases, we did yoga, we did music, we played music, so it was really nice. Bonded with a lot of people, but you were also expected to work 4 hours a day, and that could be everything from like clearing plants to like getting the water out of bamboo and to drink, like making so they can make drinks out of it. Some people prepared food, whatever was needed that day. Basically, some people were slowly making like huts for like lodges that they were in process of making. There was ceramic work that could be done on the floor. You could volunteer to lead the music or the meditation stuff, just whatever it was. So that was really nice, but it was really tough because you're out in the hot sun. There was no proper plumbing or anything. You're in like outhouses. There was a ton of mosquitoes. I touched up against a plant that had fire ants, and my arm just felt like it was on fire. There was no like proper like anything, everything was natural. And like after a matter of a couple of days, maybe like 4 days, I felt like I didn't really want to be there much longer because you take for granted some of the basics like having a proper shower or not being bit by mosquitoes 20 times a day, or having a toilet that doesn't smell like one of the worst smells of your entire life every time you need to go to the bathroom, or whatever the case may be. But I had a good time. Got to play music with some people. Definitely, it was a life experience, and very grateful for that one. I did other experiences over the years in the United States. I did one where I contributed to a project about Macedonia, and I helped review an album of traditional Macedonian music that was made, and I just did a couple of random things, whatever was asked as part of this project. There was like a volunteer website that you could help out with different projects with different people, and I chose that one, and that was cool. I've gift wrapped stuff, or actually it was part of like a gift program for underprivileged kids at it's like a giant facility. They were coordinating presents. They had gotten all these gifts, to like toys and things to give out to kids, and they were putting together packages to give out to each kid. And the kids had their own like wish lists for Christmas, and you would go around, and if they said, "Hey, I wanted a race car," you would try to find one of the remote control cars to put in their stash, or whatever the case may be. I remember doing that. I've definitely volunteered to my friends' projects. I volunteered, when I was making a movie in D or in/D with my friend. I volunteered as part of podcasts. My other friend who has the No Filters, No Fears podcast, I have joined on there just to, be part of it, offer some insight. I've also, as I mentioned about virtually, assisted with English classes in Colombia. Those are the main things that come to mind. And then, of course, just helping out and running improv programs and stuff. Definitely done a lot of that. I've done a couple other virtual type of volunteer situations here and there. And also just volunteered and done stuff with my, through my jobs and for my kids and everything else. So that's a bit of my background volunteering outside of the country. How I think it made me better is that it made me appreciate what I have, and it made me meet new people, build new relationships that I otherwise would have never had. I learned a lot about the cultures that way. It's so easy to interact with people when you're in the school, and there's between the two schools, I probably interacted with about 1,000 people between all the classes that I visited and all the teachers, and over multiple years. It was incredible, and it was awesome to feel included in that, especially in the time during the traveling that I was doing. I felt very disconnected from most everybody and everything, because I was always on the move. I wasn't around my family or friends. So having a place that felt like I was with a family of sorts was really nice. And so for as much as I volunteered and helped others, it also helped me on many levels too. And for that, it was 100% all worthwhile. And I'm really grateful for my experiences. So that's my talk about my volunteer work. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and live life now.